In the quiet chambers of the heart, where whispers carry more weight than proclamations, there exists a treasure that has been both hidden in plain sight and carefully guarded through centuries of human seeking. This treasure is not made of gold or precious stones, but of something far more valuable: the secret teachings of Jesus, the lost wisdom that transforms not just belief, but the very fabric of being itself. Like a master jeweler who cuts a diamond to reveal its inner fire, Jesus offered his teachings on multiple levels, knowing that each soul would receive exactly what it was ready to perceive. The word secret here does not imply something deliberately concealed from the masses, but rather something that can only be understood through direct experience, like trying to describe the taste of honey to someone who has never known sweetness. These teachings were given openly, yet they remained hidden because they required a different quality of listening, a listening with the whole being rather than just the mind. They were like seeds scattered on different types of soil, each one containing the same potential for transformation, yet sprouting only when the conditions of the heart were properly prepared. Throughout history, the conventional understanding of Jesus' message has been filtered through the lens of institutional interpretation, creating a beautiful yet incomplete tapestry of his true wisdom. What we have received through traditional channels, the parables of the kingdom, the Beatitudes, the Golden Rule, these are luminous threads in that tapestry, but they point towards something even more magnificent, a complete science of consciousness transformation that addresses the deepest questions of human existence. Why do we suffer? What is our true nature? How can we awaken to the reality that lies beyond the veil of ordinary perception? The lost wisdom of Jesus is not lost in the sense of being misplaced or destroyed, but rather like a river that has gone underground, continuing to flow beneath the surface of conscious awareness, occasionally bubbling up in the insights of mystics, the revelations of contemplatives, and the sudden moments of clarity that visit anyone who approaches the teachings with an open and receptive heart. This underground river carries the living water that Jesus spoke of, the kind that, once tasted, quenches a thirst we didn't even know we had. Consider how a prism takes ordinary white light and reveals the rainbow spectrum that was always present within it. The secret teachings of Jesus function in much the same way, taking the familiar stories and sayings we think we know and revealing depths of meaning that transform our understanding of reality itself. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom of heaven, he was not describing a distant destination but an immediate possibility, a way of perceiving and being that is available in this very moment. When he performed miracles, he was not displaying supernatural powers but demonstrating the natural potential that lies dormant within human consciousness when it aligns with its divine source. The tragedy of our age is not that these teachings were lost, but that we have forgotten how to decode their deeper meanings. We have become so accustomed to receiving our spiritual nourishment predigested and pre-interpreted that we have lost the capacity to chew on the mysteries for ourselves, to wrestle with the paradoxes until they yield their hidden blessings. We have traded the wild, transformative encounter with living truth for the safety of second-hand explanations and comfortable doctrines. Yet perhaps this forgetting was part of a larger pattern, a necessary descent into the valley of confusion so that the eventual remembering would be all the more precious. Like the biblical story of the prodigal son, humanity may have needed to wander far from home in order to appreciate the feast that was always waiting at the Father's table. The current revival of interest in mystical Christianity, in the Gnostic Gospels, in contemplative practices, suggests that we are ready to reclaim this birthright of direct spiritual knowing. The secret teachings reveal that the Christ is not merely a historical figure to be worshipped from a distance, but a living principle of consciousness that can be awakened within every human being. This Christ consciousness is not the exclusive property of any one religion or tradition, but the universal potential for divine realization that transcends all boundaries of culture, creed, and circumstance. It is the pearl of great price that lies hidden in the field of human awareness, waiting to be discovered by anyone willing to sell everything they think they know in order to possess it. As we embark on this exploration together, we are not seeking to add more information to our already overcrowded minds, but to create space for a different kind of knowing, the kind that comes not from accumulating facts but from becoming transparent to the truth that is always already present. We are not trying to solve the mystery of Jesus, but to allow that mystery to dissolve the false sense of separation that keeps us feeling isolated and incomplete. The invitation before us is both simple and revolutionary. To approach these teachings not as ancient history but as living transmission, not as external authority but as internal recognition, not as something to be believed but as something to be embodied. For the greatest secret of all may be this, that we ourselves are the secret teaching, the living gospel, the Word made flesh in a world that has forgotten its own divine nature but is forever on the verge of remembering. In the video that follows, we will explore how this remembering might unfold, how the ancient wisdom might speak to our contemporary challenges, and how the seeds of transformation that Jesus planted 2,000 years ago continue to germinate in the soil of sincere seeking. The journey requires nothing more than what you already possess, a heart willing to be surprised by love and a mind ready to be illuminated by truth. Within the secret teachings of Jesus lies a magnificent architecture of consciousness, a blueprint for human transformation that operates according to universal principles as precise and reliable as the laws that govern the movement of planets and the growth of trees. These are not arbitrary religious concepts but descriptions of how reality actually functions at its deepest levels. The hidden mechanics of existence that Jesus understood with such clarity that he could demonstrate their practical application through what we call miracles. The first and most foundational theme woven throughout his secret wisdom is the recognition of what he called the kingdom of heaven or kingdom of God, not as a future reward for good behavior, but as the fundamental ground of being that is always present, always available, always here. This kingdom is not a place but a way of seeing, not a destination but a dimension of consciousness that exists parallel to ordinary awareness, like a radio frequency that requires only the proper tuning to receive its transmission clearly. Jesus understood that human beings live simultaneously in two worlds: the world of appearances, where things seem separate and solid and subject to the laws of time and space, and the world of essence, where everything is recognized as expressions of one underlying reality, one divine consciousness appearing in countless forms. The secret teachings provide the keys for shifting our primary identification from the world of appearances to the world of essence, from the ego self that feels isolated and vulnerable to the Christ self that knows its unity with all life. This shift in identity is perhaps the most radical aspect of Jesus' secret wisdom. He taught that what we typically consider to be our self, the collection of thoughts, emotions, memories, and bodily sensations that we carry around like a familiar suitcase, is actually a case of mistaken identity. Our true nature, he revealed, is consciousness itself, the aware presence in which all experiences arise and dissolve like waves on the ocean of being. When Jesus declared, "I and the Father are one," he was not making an exclusive claim about his own divinity, but revealing a truth that applies to every conscious being. At the deepest level, there is no separation between the individual soul and the universal spirit. Another core theme that runs like a golden thread through the secret teachings is the principle of transformation through love. But this is not the sentimental emotion we often mistake for love, nor even the powerful attraction we feel for those close to us. The love that Jesus taught as the ultimate spiritual practice is more like a force of nature, the same power that draws the flower toward the sun and the river toward the sea. It is the fundamental attractive force that holds the universe together and draws all seeming separate parts back into recognition of their essential unity. This transformative love operates through what Jesus called dying to be reborn, a process that requires the willingness to release our grip on who we think we are in order to discover who we actually are. Like a snake that must shed its old skin to grow, or a butterfly that must dissolve completely in the chrysalis before emerging with wings, human consciousness must be willing to undergo the apparent death of its limited self-concept in order to be reborn into its unlimited nature. The secret teachings reveal that this death and rebirth is not a one-time event but an ongoing process, a continuous letting go of whatever keeps us feeling separate from the source of life itself. Every moment offers an opportunity for this transformation. Every challenge becomes an invitation to release another layer of false identity. Every relationship becomes a mirror in which we can see both our illusory separate self and our true unified nature. Jesus also taught extensively about what he called the narrow gate and the difficult path, not because the spiritual journey requires suffering or struggle, but because it demands a level of commitment and discernment that goes against the grain of conventional consciousness. The narrow gate is narrow not because God is exclusive or difficult to please, but because it requires us to leave behind everything that is not essential, everything that we have used to construct our false sense of identity. This process of spiritual refinement operates according to what could be called the principle of divine economy. Nothing real is ever lost, but everything unreal must eventually be released. Like gold that is purified by fire, consciousness must be willing to let the dross of illusion be burned away so that its essential purity can shine forth. This is why Jesus spoke so often about the necessity of losing one's life in order to find it, of becoming like little children in order to enter the kingdom, of being willing to give up everything in order to gain the one thing that truly matters. The secret teachings also reveal a profound understanding of what we might call spiritual ecology, the recognition that consciousness exists within an interconnected web of relationships that extends infinitely in all directions. Just as every cell in the body affects the health of the whole organism, every shift in individual consciousness ripples out to influence the collective awareness of humanity. This is why Jesus' emphasis on personal transformation was never separate from his concern for social justice and collective healing. Within this ecological understanding lies another core theme: the power of forgiveness as a tool for consciousness transformation. But the forgiveness that Jesus taught goes far beyond simply pardoning those who have wronged us. It is a radical recognition that everyone and everything is playing their perfect role in the grand awakening of consciousness, even when that role appears to involve mistakes, conflicts, or apparent evil. This level of forgiveness is possible only when we recognize that at the deepest level, there is no one to forgive and no one who needs forgiveness. There is only consciousness exploring itself through the play of apparent separation and return. The architecture of awakening that Jesus revealed operates through these interwoven principles like a symphony where every note contributes to the overall harmony, even when individual passages might sound dissonant when heard in isolation. The secret teachings provide not just the theory of transformation but the practical methods for embodying these principles in daily life, for allowing the kingdom of heaven to manifest through ordinary human consciousness. This is the great secret that has been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years, that every human being carries within themselves the same potential for divine realization that Jesus demonstrated, and that the kingdom of heaven is not something we must earn or achieve, but something we can recognize and embody in this very moment, regardless of our past or our circumstances. Within the tapestry of Jesus' teachings lie stories that function as more than historical accounts or moral instructions. They are encoded transmissions, symbolic dramas that speak directly to the unconscious mind and activate dormant potentials within human consciousness. These narratives operate like sacred theater, where every character represents an aspect of the human psyche, every event mirrors an internal process, and every miracle demonstrates a shift in perception that is available to anyone willing to undergo the necessary transformation. Consider the profound allegory embedded within the story of Jesus walking on water. On the surface, this appears to be a demonstration of supernatural power, but the secret teaching reveals it as a perfect metaphor for consciousness transcending the turbulent emotions and chaotic thoughts that normally keep us feeling overwhelmed and powerless. The water represents the churning sea of mental and emotional activity that characterizes ordinary human experience. The endless waves of desire and fear, hope and disappointment, anger and attachment that seem to toss us about like a small boat in a storm. When Jesus walks upon these waters, he demonstrates the possibility of maintaining awareness that is not subject to the ups and downs of emotional reactivity. He shows that consciousness, in its natural state, is like the sky that remains vast and clear regardless of what weather patterns move through it. The disciples in the boat represent different aspects of our own psyche, some frightened by the apparent impossibility of what they're witnessing, others eager to join in this transcendent state, all of them learning that what they took to be solid limitations are actually fluid possibilities. The moment when Peter attempts to walk on water himself becomes an exquisite teaching about the relationship between faith and doubt. Peter's initial success represents those peak moments when we glimpse our true nature and experience ourselves as unlimited consciousness. But when he begins to sink, it's not because he lacks some special spiritual qualification. It's because his attention shifts from the reality of what he's experiencing to the mental commentary about how impossible it should be. The secret teaching here is that faith is not belief in something external, but sustained attention to what is actually present, even when it contradicts everything we think we know about reality. Another profound symbolic narrative emerges from the story of the multiplication of loaves and fishes. While the conventional interpretation focuses on Jesus' ability to create material abundance from scarcity, the deeper teaching reveals this as a demonstration of consciousness operating from the realm of infinite supply rather than the realm of limited resources. The few loaves and fishes represent whatever we currently have available, whether that's knowledge, energy, love, or material resources. When offered to the divine consciousness that Jesus embodied, these limited resources become conduits for unlimited abundance. The real miracle is not the multiplication of food, but the shift in perception that recognizes abundance as the underlying nature of reality itself. The secret teaching suggests that scarcity is an illusion created by consciousness that has forgotten its connection to the infinite source. When we operate from the awareness of our unity with this source, we naturally become channels through which whatever is needed can flow. The thousands who are fed represent all the aspects of our being, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, that are nourished when we align with this principle of divine provision. The story of Lazarus being raised from the dead offers perhaps the most profound symbolic narrative about the nature of spiritual awakening. Lazarus represents the human soul that has become entombed in the deadening effects of identification with the ego mind. The tomb is not a place but a state of consciousness, the feeling of being cut off from the source of life, trapped in patterns of thought and behavior that feel automatic and unchangeable. The stone that seals the tomb represents all the beliefs, assumptions, and habitual ways of seeing that keep us imprisoned in this deadened state. When Jesus calls Lazarus, "Come forth," he demonstrates the power of divine love to awaken consciousness from even the deepest states of spiritual death. But notice that Lazarus emerges still wrapped in burial cloths. The old patterns and conditioning are still present, but they no longer have the power to keep him trapped. The final instruction to loose him and let him go reveals that awakening is not just a single moment of realization, but an ongoing process of releasing the vestiges of the old identity and learning to live from the freedom of our true nature. The symbolic narrative of the Transfiguration provides another layer of this esoteric wisdom. When Jesus appears in radiant light alongside Moses and Elijah, the secret teaching reveals this as a demonstration of consciousness recognizing its own luminous nature. Moses represents the law, the understanding that reality operates according to precise spiritual principles. Elijah represents the prophetic tradition, the ability to perceive beyond the veil of appearances. Together with Jesus, they form a trinity that represents the integration of wisdom, power, and love within awakened consciousness. The disciples' response to this vision is equally instructive. Peter's impulse to build tabernacles represents the ego's tendency to try to capture and institutionalize peak spiritual experiences. But the voice from the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him," redirects attention back to the present moment and the living transmission that is always available through conscious presence. The secret teaching here is that enlightenment is not a special state to be preserved in memory, but our natural condition to be recognized and embodied moment by moment. Perhaps the most comprehensive symbolic narrative is found in the crucifixion and resurrection, which represents the complete cycle of ego death and spiritual rebirth that every sincere seeker must undergo. The cross is not just an instrument of execution, but a symbol of the intersection between heaven and earth, time and eternity, human and divine. The crucifixion represents the willingness to allow everything that is false within us to die, all the ways we have tried to construct security and identity outside of our connection to the divine source. The 3 days in the tomb represent the dark night of the soul that often precedes spiritual breakthrough, the period when old ways of being have died but new life has not yet emerged. The resurrection demonstrates that consciousness itself is indestructible, that our true nature cannot be touched by any apparent death or loss. The secret teaching reveals that this death and resurrection is not a one-time historical event, but an ongoing process available to anyone willing to let their false self die so that their true self can be born. These sacred narratives function as maps of consciousness, showing us the territory we must navigate on our own journey of awakening. They reveal that the kingdom of heaven is not a place we go to, but a dimension of being we can access by undergoing the same essential transformations that these stories encode in symbolic form. The profound insights embedded within Jesus' secret teachings might seem like beautiful abstractions, elevated spiritual concepts that belong more to the realm of contemplation than to the messy realities of daily existence. Yet the true test of any spiritual wisdom lies not in how well it sounds in theory, but in how effectively it transforms the ordinary moments of human life, the challenging conversations, the financial pressures, the health concerns, the relationship conflicts that make up the fabric of our earthly experience. The secret teachings were never intended to create a separate spiritual compartment in our lives, but to infuse every aspect of existence with a recognition of the sacred. When we truly understand that the kingdom of heaven is not a distant destination but a present reality, we begin to see that every encounter becomes an opportunity for divine communion, every challenge becomes an invitation for deeper surrender, and every ordinary moment becomes a doorway to the extraordinary. Consider how the principle of dying to be reborn translates into the practical realm of personal relationships. When someone speaks to us in anger or frustration, our automatic response is typically to defend ourselves, to prove our point, or to withdraw in hurt. But the secret teaching of ego death suggests a radically different possibility. What if we could allow the part of us that feels attacked to simply dissolve in that moment, creating space for a response that comes from our deeper nature rather than our defensive conditioning? This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or failing to maintain appropriate boundaries. Instead, it means discovering that when we stop defending a false self that was never real anyway, we gain access to authentic strength that doesn't need to prove itself through argument or aggression. We find that we can respond to others' pain with compassion rather than reactivity, creating space for healing rather than escalating conflict. This is the practical application of Jesus' teaching to turn the other cheek. Not passive submission, but conscious non-resistance that transforms the entire dynamic of the interaction. The principle of divine provision, demonstrated in the multiplication of loaves and fishes, offers profound implications for how we approach material security and financial abundance. The conventional consciousness operates from the assumption of scarcity. There's not enough to go around, we must compete for limited resources. We need to hoard what we have out of fear that we won't have enough in the future. But the secret teaching reveals that abundance is not about accumulating more things, but about recognizing our connection to the inexhaustible source from which all things flow. Practically, this might mean making career decisions based on alignment with our authentic purpose rather than just financial reward, trusting that when we offer our genuine gifts to the world, the universe will provide what we need. It might mean practicing generosity even when our bank account suggests we can't afford it, discovering that the act of giving actually creates more space for receiving. It might mean approaching financial challenges not with panic and grasping, but with curiosity about what we're being called to learn or release. The transformative power of forgiveness becomes immediately practical when we understand it as a tool for freeing ourselves from the prison of resentment and blame. When someone has hurt us deeply, the conventional response is to carry that hurt like a badge of honor, rehearsing the story of how we were wronged, waiting for acknowledgement or apology that may never come. But the secret teaching reveals that forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior or pretending that nothing happened. It's about recognizing that holding on to resentment hurts us far more than it hurts the other person. Practical forgiveness becomes possible when we understand that everyone is doing the best they can from their current level of consciousness, even when their best looks pretty terrible from our perspective. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior or eliminate the need for appropriate consequences, but it allows us to respond from wisdom rather than reactivity. We might still need to create boundaries or seek justice, but we can do so without carrying the poison of hatred in our own hearts. The teaching about being in the world, but not of the world, offers guidance for navigating the intense political and social divisions that characterize our current era. The secret wisdom suggests that we can be deeply engaged with the challenges of our time without becoming identified with any particular position or losing our inner peace in the process. This doesn't mean spiritual bypassing or avoiding difficult issues, but rather bringing the clarity of higher consciousness to bear on worldly problems. Practically, this might mean engaging in social justice work from a place of love rather than anger, working for positive change without demonizing those who disagree with us. It might mean staying informed about current events without becoming addicted to the drama and outrage that characterize much of our media landscape. It might mean recognizing that lasting social transformation can only come from individual transformation, and that the most radical thing we can do is to embody the consciousness we want to see in the world. The principle of present moment awareness becomes a practical tool for managing anxiety and depression, those twin epidemics of modern consciousness. When we're anxious, we're typically projecting ourselves into an imaginary future, creating stories about all the things that might go wrong. When we're depressed, we're often trapped in an imaginary past, replaying old hurts and disappointments. The secret teaching of presence offers a refuge in the eternal now, where neither anxiety nor depression can maintain their grip on consciousness. Practical presence might mean learning to catch ourselves when we notice our minds spinning stories about future disasters, and gently returning attention to what is actually happening right now. It might mean developing the capacity to feel difficult emotions fully without being overwhelmed by them, recognizing that all feelings are temporary visitors in the spaciousness of awareness. It might mean cultivating gratitude not as a positive thinking technique, but as a way of recognizing the miraculous nature of ordinary existence. The secret teaching about the Christ consciousness within offers profound implications for how we understand purpose and service in the world. Rather than searching outside ourselves for our mission or waiting for some external authority to validate our calling, we can learn to listen to the still small voice within, that always knows what wants to emerge through us in each moment. This might mean trusting our intuitive guidance even when it doesn't make logical sense, or being willing to step into leadership roles that our ego feels unqualified to handle. Service becomes not a burden or obligation, but the natural overflow of consciousness that has recognized its unity with all life. We find ourselves moved to help not because we should, but because the artificial boundaries between self and other have begun to dissolve. We discover that every act of genuine service is simultaneously self-serving, because there is ultimately no one else to serve. These practical applications require ongoing commitment and practice. They invite us to live as conscious experiments, constantly testing the principles of the secret teachings against the laboratory of our daily experience, refining our understanding through trial and error, celebrating small victories while remaining humble about how much we still have to learn. We have journeyed together through landscapes of hidden wisdom, traversed the territories where ancient teachings meet contemporary longing, and explored the secret chambers where transformation awaits those brave enough to enter. Now, as our exploration draws to its natural completion, we find ourselves not at an ending but at a threshold, the place where understanding becomes embodiment, where knowledge transforms into being, where the seeker and the sought dissolve into the unified field of pure awareness. The secret teachings of Jesus, in all their mysterious depth and practical simplicity, ultimately point to one fundamental truth that revolutionizes everything. You are not who you think you are. The small, separate self that seems to struggle through life, accumulating experiences and defending its boundaries, is but a temporary costume worn by the infinite spirit that is your true nature. This recognition is not a philosophical concept to be understood intellectually, but a living reality to be experienced directly, moment by moment, breath by breath. What makes these teachings truly secret is not that they were hidden from view, but that they can only be received by a consciousness that has been prepared through the alchemy of sincere practice and authentic surrender. Like a radio that must be tuned to the proper frequency to receive a clear signal, the human heart must be attuned to the frequency of love, compassion, and selfless service before it can decode the deeper transmissions that Jesus offered to humanity. The lost wisdom is found not by searching in ancient texts or exotic traditions, but by turning attention inward to the source from which all wisdom springs. In the stillness of deep meditation, in the silence that follows genuine prayer, in the space between thoughts where the eternal dwells, the teachings reveal themselves as lived truth rather than borrowed knowledge. Here, in this intimate sanctuary of the soul, the Christ consciousness awakens naturally, like dawn breaking over a landscape that was always there but hidden by the darkness of forgetting. This awakening is not a one-time event but an ongoing process of deepening recognition, of learning to see through the eyes of love rather than the eyes of fear, of choosing again and again to align with the highest rather than the lowest common denominator of human possibility. Each moment presents a new opportunity to embody the teachings, to become a living demonstration of the principles that Jesus modeled in his earthly ministry. The practical implications of this inner transformation ripple outward in ways both subtle and profound. Relationships become opportunities for mutual awakening rather than battlegrounds for competing egos. Work becomes service rather than mere survival. Challenges become invitations to discover deeper reserves of strength and wisdom. Even suffering, when met with the proper understanding, becomes a doorway to greater compassion and a more tender appreciation for the preciousness of life itself. Yet the ultimate purpose of these teachings is not personal transformation alone, but the healing of the collective wound that keeps humanity trapped in cycles of conflict, competition, and unconscious suffering. As individuals awaken to their true nature, they become agents of healing in a world desperate for authentic peace. They become living bridges between heaven and earth, translating the language of divine love into forms that others can recognize and receive. The call that echoes through these secret teachings is both ancient and eternally fresh. Come and see. Not come and believe or come and obey, but come and see for yourself. This is an invitation to direct experience, to first-hand knowledge, to the kind of knowing that transforms the knower in the very act of knowing. It is a call to adventure in the deepest sense, the adventure of discovering who you really are when all the masks have been removed and all the false identities have been lovingly released. This discovery cannot be made on behalf of another, just as no one can breathe your breath or beat your heart. Each person must walk the path with their own feet, open the door with their own hand, taste the living water with their own lips. Yet paradoxically, this most intimate of journeys is also the most universal, for in finding our true self, we discover the self that is the ground of all existence, the common source from which all apparent diversity springs. The secret teachings of Jesus offer no easy shortcuts or magical formulas, but rather the timeless principles that guide sincere seekers toward the direct realization of their divine heritage. They demand everything, the willingness to die to who we think we are so that we might be reborn as who we truly are. Yet they also promise everything, the kind of fulfillment that the world cannot give and cannot take away, the peace that surpasses understanding, the joy that has no opposite. As you close these words and return to the rhythm of daily life, carry with you not more concepts to ponder but a deeper trust in the wisdom that already dwells within you. The secret teachings are not something you need to acquire but something you need to remember, not something you need to achieve but something you need to allow. They are written not in books but in the fabric of your being, encoded not in ancient languages but in the universal language of the heart. The invitation remains open, as fresh and compelling today as it was 2,000 years ago, to step out of the boat of conventional thinking and walk on the water of pure faith, to leave the familiar shores of what you think you know and venture into the vast ocean of what you truly are. In this great adventure of awakening, you are never alone, for the very consciousness that animated the one we call Jesus continues to move through every sincere seeker, guiding, supporting, and celebrating each step toward the light. The secret is no longer secret when it is lived. The wisdom is no longer lost when it is found in the depths of your own being. The teacher is no longer other when you discover that you and the source of all teaching are one. This is the ultimate revelation, the final secret, the completion of the circle that began with the first stirring of spiritual longing in the human heart. May you walk in this knowing. May you rest in this peace. May you become the living embodiment of the love that you have always been, that you will always be, that you can never cease to be. For in the end, this is what the secret teachings whisper in the silence of the heart. You are the beloved, you are the light, you are the very presence of the divine expressing itself through the unique and precious form that you call your life. The circle is complete, yet the journey continues. The secret is revealed, yet the mystery deepens. The wisdom is found, yet the learning never ends. And in this beautiful paradox, we discover the true nature of the path itself, not a destination to be reached, but a way of being to be embodied, moment by precious moment, for all eternity.